It is 7:01. I hereby call this meeting of the Londonderry Heritage Commission to order this 25th day of May 2023.
That was it.
We have all full members present. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our prior meeting. I've looked them over. They looked good to me. Did anybody else have any issues?
Nope, I didn't.
Okay.
I'll,
Like to have a motion?
Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of March 23rd, 2023 as presented.
Motioned and seconded by David. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Okay, on to our formal review applications. First on the list is an application for design review of a site plan for the construction of a 58,432 square foot warehouse and storage facility and associated site improvements at 88A Harvey Road. Patriot Holdings LLC applicant and VAB Properties LLC owner.
Where was that?
Wait.
Hi, good evening. John Noonan with Fieldstone Land Consultants. I'm here on behalf of Patriot Holdings, who is the applicant, looking to purchase the property. So they're looking at a development of an industrial site. This was a continued meeting from the last last hearing where Nate Chamberlain from our office had covered the meeting. So I'm standing in for Nate tonight. Some of the items that were discussed that were as open items was the lighting plan and confirmation on the lighting that was provided. So we have a photometric plan that's included in our site plans, sheet LT1, and I can gladly hand in what fixtures are shown. So we have them, what fixtures, make, model is on that sheet on LT1, and they're shown as full cutoff, and I have the spec sheets printed out from the manufacturer so that they show that they're a dark sky compliant fixture. So full cutoff, meaning that nothing's going above 90%, and I can hand this in where it says zero uplight, and it has the standard dark sky compliant for both fixtures. If you'd like, I'd like to submit these as well.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
One of the other items that was left open was the dumpster enclosure. So previous plans that were submitted last year when we had two separate buildings that were contractor storage type buildings, as we've gone to this light industrial style building, the dumpster enclosures that were on both ends, the east and west side of the site prior, have been removed. They're now going to have a compactor, so it's an enclosed compactor. So they would open up a door that would be covered, drop into the trash compactor, and keep the 30-yard trash compactor until it's full, and then that would either be Waste Management or another company that they would have a contract with. So there is no open dumpsters or dumpster enclosures. It's just a more or less attached to the building. They back up the compactor right to a dock door on that east side where all the loading docks are. So each tenant would have their own trash compactor. Mechanical pad locations, to show where those are. So at this time, they haven't designed full mechanicals yet. However, the applicant has decided that anything that's going to be will be wall mounted, and then they'll have the roof mounted portion. So they're not going to do separate ground mounted pads for mechanical HVAC equipment. It'd be roof mounted, and it would be on that southern side of the roof so that it wasn't visible from the public way. There was a question on the roof color. So in our submitted renderings, it's basically a light gray color scheme. The roof is a slate gray. So that's the roof. That is the color that the applicant, in talking to them, said yes, it's going to be all gray color scheme. So it's a metal panel roof, and it's slate gray, so a darker gray and a lighter gray metal panel siding color. And one of the last items that was in question was the sign colors, or if there were any tenant signs. So, yep, that is the sign that was submitted. There are places for tenant signs on that. However, they don't have tenants lined up at this time to say exactly what their colors would be. It would be similar to the white background, and meeting the sign requirements and standards for the town. So each tenant would get a slot on that monument sign. You know, they might have a company logo that would be whatever colors that company might have for logo colors, but it would just be the white background, similar to what the all-purpose industrial portion of that sign is. If they do any signs that are mounted on the building, we would have that put on the tenant, so the tenant would come forward and permit those signs separately of the site plan. So those were the last items that were listed with Nate when he attended the last meeting, but I can clearly answer other questions or on these items that we just discussed.
Yeah, I agree. Based on our notes from the last meeting, it seems like you've covered everything that we had requested. Were there renderings in the group of files anywhere? I noticed there's a few different things in here. I just didn't know which one it might be under.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good on here. Thank you.
Is this what you have?
Yeah, so we have the building elevations, and then we also have color renderings, and I could certainly submit those if they weren't submitted during the last hearing. I thought they were. But we have a file for the new building showing each side of the building, a rendering from the Plainview Drive side. So this is looking basically right at the driveway from Plainview Drive. This is at the end of the cul-de-sac. So gray color scheme, darker gray on the bottom, and a dark metal panel roof. And the two entryways for the two buildings, tenants there. And then the other side would be,
What color is that accent color on top there?
on here,
Yeah.
it's gonna be, this is darker gray, a lighter gray panel.
Oh, is that shade between is that what you're showing on the picture? The darker
Kind
color
of
between?
under the eave.
Yeah, oh, this is just a shadow line. On the rendering. And we can certainly submit these electronically, so we have many that show the different sides, but the edge metal right on the edge is like a darker slate gray. The metal roofing is the same. A real light gray metal panel, and then a dark gray band that's about 2 feet high on the bottom.
That's all metal siding for the
Yes,
building
all
too?
metal siding.
Okay.
Is this a pre-engineered building? Like from
Yes, sir.
Morton or Indian or Butler or whatever?
Yes.
It is.
I have no further commentary or questions. Anybody else on the commission?
Looks like a good design for near the airport.
Okay, looks like we're all set.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Email you the electronic files of this.
Thank you.
I did notice that this is listed as 88A Harvey Road, but is this actually going to be a Plainview Road address?
It will, yes.
Yeah,
It's
okay,
not addressed at this time.
gotcha. Okay, the next application is for a site plan amendment to merge two existing lots and construct a 16-unit residential building with supporting infrastructure at 215 Rockingham Road. V&W Investment Group LLC, owner and applicant.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Doug McGuire. I'm with the Dubé Group, the civil engineer on the project, and Jeff Kuehl with Berard Martel, the architect on the project. So you have seen this before. This came before you at your last meeting, and unfortunately, we weren't here to present. There was a miscommunication on the schedule on that, so for that, I apologize. But we did get your comments, and looking to discuss those comments, and we did try to make some improvements and also provided some additional renderings. And Kelly, I don't know if you have those renderings of the site. Perfect. So what we did is we took some time to do a real rendering of the site, of what it will truly be looking at. And this is not just a pretty picture. This is actually our proposed landscape plan, exactly the exact type of plants. Our landscape architect is the one who actually put this together. So what you're seeing is a true representation of what it would ultimately look like. And so our thought was, I know there was some concerns brought up about the facade of the building on the side, and whether there could be anything that would, could be done to break that up. Our thought was we wanted at least to explore this option with this commission, to show you that we felt that the landscaping is going to do a good job of breaking up that facade. It was intentional where we placed the street trees, and there's a pretty robust landscaping plan as part of this. And you can see those trees are doing a nice job of breaking that up. And as you approach, if you go back one, Kelly, real quick, I mean, that's the streetscape that you're seeing as you come in, and we're elevated a little bit, so obviously we wanted to show you the building, but in reality, that view would be lower, and you'd be looking through those trees even at the actual building itself. So we did, where we could make changes per your request, we did. We added in the 6/6 on the windows. That was a suggestion that the members had. And we did look at that side of the building to see if there was anything obvious, but you can see that with the architecture the way it is, with where the balconies are and how they're situated on that side of the building, there isn't really a lot of opportunity to provide additional breakups. And so our thought was that the landscaping did a nice job with that, and we were hopeful that you may feel the same. If you could go to slide 3, Kelly, thank you. So, and we continue to do the landscaping. Obviously, I know this is not building related, but there was some existing buffer that was going to be impacted, and we really naturalized that slope and provided some additional plantings in that area to, accentuate. We tried to use plantings that the town of Londonderry likes to see, because we've done projects in town before. And then the last slide you can see is just that's the rear side of the building where we have our pond system, and, that's going to be allowed to fully naturalize as well. So, as I said, these are realistic renderings. In fact, we even, as part of the process, we located all existing trees, so some of the big, large, mature trees that you see surrounding the pond area, those are realistic canopies, realistic existing canopy of existing trees that are proposed to be preserved. So that's what we came back with. We were just hoping that, that might have eased some of your concerns, and in looking at, what the real representation of the building will be. And here to take any comments.
So a couple other notes that we had was regarding materials and colors. How well do you think that the rendering represents the actual color that you're going to be putting on the building?
I can let Jeff speak to that, but it is that was the intent. Obviously, the brick looks a little different maybe than in real life, but it is intended to be. Jeff, you can speak to that.
Yeah, and we did for the green, for the sage green, we did actually take color samples from the siding that they had recommended that they wanted to use. We had gone through a couple different colors for the building, so those were taken right from the color palette, and I forget what the exact color is, but they were very representative of what they're looking to put on there for the green. Both there, I think there's, you know, some areas of lap siding and then some cedar shingle type look, you know, shingle look too, that they're all within that same green family that.
Okay. As far as materials, is that gonna be mostly vinyl siding?
Yeah, it's gonna be vinyl siding with, you know, composite trim for windows and corner boards, freeze boards and stuff like that, but they are.
Yeah,
looking at it.
that front middle facade there looks like, brick or stone.
Yeah, it would be, right now, they're looking at more of a brick veneer is what we're looking on doing there. We had it looked at a stone as well, but for aesthetics and whatnot, they've chosen to go with the brick for the front centerpiece. So it would be either a full brick or a, you know, half brick veneer.
Okay. As far as the breaking up the side of the building, I think personally, you're right. The landscaping does a pretty good job. And I can see what you mean about finding it kind of difficult to add architectural elements that might break up that side of the building.
And it was, you know, window placement for bedrooms and stuff. It was, you know, it was not difficult, but it kind of, you know, lent itself to that type of arrangement. And so I think the trees do a good job of breaking that up where maybe there isn't the windows behind it and stuff that.
I personally agree with you, but I'd like to open up discussion to the rest of the commission.
I would agree. You can buy trees this big, I assume. Or not cheap, I'm sure, but it does a lot to dress it up and keeps the focal point to the actual front, which is on the side. So it's not as confusing. It definitely breaks it up and I think would be at least pleasant, you know, for the motoring public that passes by or those that pass by and notice such things, but usually people behind the wheel are single-minded, so.
So are we talking about a little bit bigger caliber trees in the planting?
I mean, obviously, the trees that are shown are more mature.
Yeah.
I mean, they won't be that big when they're first
Yeah, I
planted.
wouldn't expect.
I don't know I can tell you what the caliper is intended to be.
Well, my opinion is, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's laid out good. I think it's a good use of the property, quite frankly. You know, the only thing that I would like to see on that end to try to soften a little bit is to use a larger caliber tree. I'm not asking you to go overboard, but, you know, I don't want to see a small little caliber tree there that's going to take,
Like
you
a
know,
6
probably
inches something.
dead in the grade before it reaches 15 feet. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Well, in the rendering, that looks like about a 25-foot tree, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we use the software, it's the exact plants. I mean, obviously, the lilacs, you can see they're, you know, more robust and built out, and it is more of as a matured growth. But, I mean, that's the goal of what it will be looking like, you know, upon its maturity. We're showing 2.5-inch calipers right now, which is per the requirements. You know, I think obviously if there's opportunity to plant them a little bit more robust, we can look to try to do that. I don't know how extreme the cost difference goes, like if you go up to 3 or 4-inch caliper, if all of a sudden is it 4 times the price or if it's just a little bit more, obviously that's in the cards to do that.
Yeah, we looked at a tree for the town common, which I think is still a work in progress, but that was big and quite costly, you know. So that's why it's not there yet.
Well, I think they could, you know, do the best they can, but I think this is a great use of the property. Cleans it up.
Oh, yes. A major improvement on what's there now.
From the minutes, it was suggested that they consider brick color panels for those blank ones on either side of the building on the front, just below the 2 peaked areas, to give you 3 brick colored segments on the front.
The peaked areas where the doors are, or the
Two gables.
The blank panels
Here,
underneath the peaked.
I can say that we did actually look at that, and it was a decision of, you know, the owners and their team that they liked it this way better as far as the look for themselves aesthetically. But we did look at something like that. I don't know if we can re-entertain it but I mean, it's more of just of an aesthetic, material choice, but it was.
Yeah, and I think view 3 might show the,
I mean, we've changed the siding in there, so it's not the same, horizontal lap siding as the rest of it.
Yeah, I
To
mean-
throw, to give a little bit of contrast. And the colors on those, just because of the difference in the material, or one's a lap siding, one's like a shake, it gives a little color contrast as well, that one tends to be darker than the other, even in actuality when they're on there. That's what we try to do, is to keep within the,
I think our thought when we talked about it was that the entrances, they're already a focal point, being the, having the columns and the ridge out in front. To try to put something in, it might feel a little, it might have felt a little forced just behind just the door like that, having just those two isolated spots that might jump at you from the street a little bit more aggressively than you were thinking. That was our take, but.
Are we talking about the same thing? I was referring to the really tall blank panels
on the gables, right,
that are on, between windows.
right.
That's
On those two gables on either side.
where the
That's
two
what-
gables are.
Yeah, so, right here.
Oh,
And
oh.
here. And that's what I was talking about as well, that we
Yeah.
had looked at that, and
We're
again,
doing
I.
those in brick panels.
leave it for the. I like it like this. Right, so that's, aesthetically.
Other questions or commentary?
I just wanted, Mr. Chairman, I have a note from the previous minutes about historic reference on this property. Did that turn out to be anything Donati House or?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No,
We did discuss that with the owner. There's no historic background on this particular house. The Donati, Maggie brought that up to me. I don't know if you know about that, Johnny, but.
Hi, I'm John Verani, 73 Page Road. There used to be a house on this property that came down probably 30 years ago, but it's no longer there. The other house, I know, I was born in '69, and I think my father built that in '68, so I don't think that's historic.
I did do a little
capacity.
digging on the state historic website as well, and I couldn't find anything on this address.
I can say that we did the same thing in our office, more for curiosity than anything. We went to the state website to see if there was anything on the Donati House or any type of listing for that area, and we couldn't find anything. So I'm not sure where the reference had come from, but.
Okay.
Is there still script and writing on what you have designated as right elevation on some drawings?
Your sign.
Yeah, so
Coas Crossing.
Yeah, it says,
Jeff put that in there as a, I don't know, just something to liven up the building, but I don't think you folks like that, so we took it out.
what, there was somewhere we had got a,
Yeah, and now, honestly, Coas Crossing wasn't, that just was
right, it was
just thrown on there. So
put on there that-
if you
right,
wanted to
not
call
really
it something
schematic
else,
page, yeah.
we could do that too, but, I think you were saying that it tied into the whole water system that's in that area up by Route 28, Coas, so. But there's a Coas landing down the street.
Right, I
too.
know, yeah, coming in.
So,
At this point, is Cohos Crossing going to be the name of the development, or is it?
I guess that's, if everything gets approved, that's on the plans, but
We only put that on the rendering stuff, so, it really, there wasn't any naming of the development within, like, our approved site plan, so I think there's still opportunity to modify that, and that didn't come up at the approval process with the planning board as far as,
Sure. Yeah, I'm only asking out of
There
curiosity.
wasn't any discussion on that or
No.
signage or anything. So
no, there's no not a lot of thought to the name, but it just was something that Jeff thought was, kind of corresponds to the area, that's all.
John, a quick question. Mailboxes, are they inside?
There's a little mailbox state, I think it shows it on one of those, but there's a little mailbox area out front.
Okay.
And I think there's a little area for like Amazon too. And then up in front of the building too, which is a suggestion of the planning board, there's a parking area for like, what's the Grubhub type stuff, you know, and ambulances and things of that nature come up, so. we have it all
Delivery
up
only
front.
space.
Yeah, and then there's some bike racks right there as well. Rail trails right down the street. So we're hoping that, you know, people, kids and folks that are in there, well, probably not gonna be a lot of kids because 2 bedrooms, but folks will use that and tie into the rail trail system.
Yeah, I live in Auburn, I use it all the time, it's great, the kids love it.
Now, with regards to the trees, you can ask your son, but we're gonna do the ones that are probably the healthiest and will adapt the quickest. The larger trees, they tend to really get delayed when they first go in because there's a ton of shock and, you know, because there's such a big tree to support. So I think we had 2.5 caliper on the plan, and so I don't know. We have an orchard at our house, and I remember I had a arborist come over one time for the woodlands that we have out there, and he said, a tree sleeps, creeps, and leaps. So it takes like 3 years, but usually in that 3-year time, you'll see just about everything catch up to its existing pace. So thought process here is it'll make it really nice, really pretty.
What does a 2.5 caliper equate to as far as like height? You talking about like a 10 or 12 foot tree?
I would think 8 to
Something like
12,
that.
depending on the type of tree and, you know, its characteristics.
Okay.
I think maybe lindens, or I don't know, did you have it actually specified in the plan? Maples
No,
or
because,
linden?
I mean, the regulations want it by caliper, you know, that's how they're sold, so it doesn't, I think because there's some variability, like your evergreens sometimes are a little shorter by caliper, but your deciduous trees are
Yeah.
typically a little, because they have the
That's
branches.
definitely a
and-
deciduous tree, is shown at the end there. So get something that's pretty substantial and beautiful, you know.
Any further questions or comments?
I'm all set.
I'll comment,
Go ahead.
only in that you made the peaks, the panes in the windows, and outstanding landscaping. Bravo. Because you have to go through thick and thin to get this, and this is like, what?
Nice, well, thanks very much.
Appreciate that.
Yeah,
Nice job, gentlemen.
yeah.
I will make notes to approve as submitted. To recommend approval as submitted.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you very
Very
much.
much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Guys, could I get business cards for the minutes?
Yes.
Oh,
I don't have one, but I can,
I think we can get 'em.
Yeah. No, here.
I only carry like 3 in my wallet, and I had a meeting earlier today, and they're gone.
That's funny, I just reloaded, because it's the same thing.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, moving on. Our next application is for design review of a site plan for a 102,418 square foot manufacturing facility and associated site improvements at 55 Pettingill Road. NB Development Group LLC applicant and 1 Pettingill Road Realty LLC owner.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jim Petropoulos. I'm a professional engineer at Hayner Swanson, Inc., doing business at 3 Congress Street in Nashua, New Hampshire. With me this evening is Shane Mulrooney. He is our project architect, and tonight we're representing New Balance Development Group. Jim Halliday is in the audience this evening, as with familiar face Kevin Smith, who's acting as a consultant for the project. The purpose of being here this evening, of course, is we have an application pending with the Londonderry Planning staff and department and for site plan approval. and we're here seeking input from the Heritage Commission. What I'd like to do, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is give a brief presentation, kind of walk through the the kind of physical and visuals of the project, and then we'll be happy to answer questions. Certainly, we'll lean on Shane to answer a number of the architectural questions.
Please, floor is yours.
Kelly, are you manning?
Got it, yeah.
Doing me a favor, thank you. So let's get you located first. This property is located at the corner of Pettingill Road in Ray Wazorek Drive, which is in the northwest corner of Londonderry, up near the airport. Is a 17-acre piece of property. It's located in the GB Gateway Zone, and it's really abutted by the Ray Wazorek Highway to the west, Pettingill to the south. EFI's facility is due north, and recently subdivided property, a 4-acre property, separates our site from Innovation Way. Of course, our neighbors are Prologis, UPS, FW Webb, Bella Vance Beverage, and Milton Cat in that part of town. Our client, New Balance Development Group, has an option on this property that's currently owned by the King Family Ventures. You've probably been by it. It's a very visible site if you've been down Pettingill Road. The site contains a combination of woods and open fields. The physical features of the property are pretty unremarkable. It appears to be a flat site, but there's some gentle gradient from the cul-de-sac up at the Innovation Way, grading down towards the intersection of Ray Wazorek and Pettingill Road. What's being proposed, what you see on the screen this evening, is a site plan for a 102,418 square foot manufacturing facility for New Balance with accompanying site improvements. This proposal is intended to be the 6th US-based manufacturing facility for New Balance. If you don't know New Balance, they're in the shoe, sneaker, and apparel manufacturing business. Couple key elements to the site plan. Access will be off a shared driveway off of Innovation Way. We will also proposing a right turn in, right turn out onto Pettingill Road. Employee and visitor parking is on the west side of the site, about 270 parking spaces. Our loading dock, there are 7 dock positions on the west side of the building, as well as parking, trailer parking for 10 vehicles. That is located, again, on the west side. We do have one surface-type stormwater treatment practice that is on the southeast corner of the site. And the other 2 practices will be beneath the parking lot and beneath the open area along Pettingill. Next slide, please, Kelly. We've had a landscape plan prepared by Paul Mao, who was a registered landscape architect, and is part of our plan set. The focus was really along the perimeter of the parking lot on the Ray Wazorek and Pettingill, as well as the trees in the southeast corner, along with a berm that will seek to really kind of hide that loading dock area and that surface-type stormwater treatment practice. Approximately 100 trees are proposed, combination of maple trees, hackberry, aspen, black gum, cedar, spruce, and white pine trees make up the list of trees. As you know, the Londonderry site plan regulations have some pretty thorough and detailed requirements for landscaping within paved parking areas. My testimony this evening is that we will comply with both open space and the plantings in the employee parking lot, 270 spaces. Sir, we will be asking for a singular waiver from the planning board, and it has to do with the trailer parking area. With 10 spaces, one of the requirements is that we introduce a landscape island in the trailer parking area to support a single tree. For a number of reasons, whether it's snow maintenance or just vehicle movements, given the small size of that trailer parking area, we thought we would seek a waiver And we've taken the tree that was supposed to be in the middle of that trailer parking area, and we've placed it somewhere else on the property. Also in our plan set, next drawing, please, Kelly, is a site lighting plan. And while this drawing is fairly unremarkable to look at, it does have a lot of content. The lighting out there will be a combination of light poles on the entrance driveways and in the parking lots, as well as wall packs at the building. All the lighting is LED. All the fixtures are full cut-off luminaires. Those fixture heights on the poles are approximately 30 feet off the ground, which is fairly common for that park out there. Most importantly, no spillover of lighting off the property to any of our butters or into the public streets. The building, next plan, Kelly, thank you. I'm going to walk through very quickly the building and the signage, and then again, Shane's here to answer any questions. As mentioned, it is a one-story facility measuring 102,418 square feet. And that's really broken up into two pieces. The front piece is to be an office piece, 20,000 square feet in size. And then the manufacturing facility will be 80,000 square feet. Flat roof on both areas of the building. The offices will measure 14 feet in height from outside grade to the roof. The manufacturing facility approximately 22 feet from the outside grade to the top of the roof. You'll notice in the drawings, we have a canopied entrance. That lower left right there gives you a face-on view of that canopied entrance. It's really for employees into the office portion of the building. There's a slight canopy that we'll see in a couple of the details and a couple of the graphics as we pan through this. Exterior materials for the offices, metal panels, fixed glass windows with a blackish tint to the windows. The manufacturing will be precast concrete panels, and you'll see a number of windows up high to provide some natural light into the manufacturing areas, also fixed glass. In terms of colors, if we go to the last couple, Kelly. Yeah, a couple more. There you go. You'll see the offices have a lower band of kind of a charcoal metal panel, and it transitions to an off-white color on the higher portions of the office. That's a good graphic up top of the canopied entrance into the office portion of the facility. The manufacturing facility will be a charcoal color. I want to talk quickly about signage. The project will contain both site signage and building signage. And Kelly, I have to ask you if you'd scroll back a few. The site signage, there will be a singular ground sign, and that will be located on the west side of the site, in between Ray Wazorek Drive and our parking lot. And that sign, that ground sign you see, is a combination of a stone wall that measures about 70 feet by 4 feet, and then the 30-foot by 7-foot New Balance sign will sit atop of that. We also have two building signs. There is a sign with the logoed New Balance emblem located above the entrance into the offices with the New Balance manufacturing sign. And then the second building mounted sign is way over on the east part of the site on the manufacturing with the logoed NB, New Balance Manufacturing. The ground sign will be externally lit in the front, and the building signs measure approximately 30 feet by 5 feet. Based on our cursory review of the Londonderry site plan regs, the sizing and setbacks and locations comply with the current sign regulations. So in summary, Mr. Chairman, New Balance, as we know, is a recognized global brand, so there is a certain amount of branding that goes with the signing and kind of the color schemes. We've incorporated those into this plan. They're excited to hopefully call Londonderry home. but we've, still got some work to go, still got some process to go. So with that, that's our quick summary. Both Shane and I, or Jim, if need be, will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'm sure we're gonna have a couple of questions about this, but one thing that kind of jumps up to me right off the bat is that more or less directly where you're planning to put your sign, there's an existing sign, monument sign, that says Pettingill Industrial Park.
Yes.
That's correct.
Do you guys know what the plan is for that current sign? Are we gonna remove that to put in this sign?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So we've had discussions with New Balance about that. That sign is on property that's going to be acquired here in a short time frame. To my knowledge, the town doesn't have the legal right to insist that it remain there. And in order to facilitate this project and welcome New Balance to town, we are more than willing to relocate that sign. I think that it was initially placed there when Pettingill Road certainly did not look like it does today. You almost don't need a sign to find Pettingill Road in 2023, so that sign is not an obstacle to anything that's being proposed here.
Okay. Questions, comments from other commissioners?
Who's next?
No, I know New Balance, they're gonna be a great addition to the community. And they have they're good neighbors, they really are. And they keep their facilities up very respectably. And I think this is a great addition.
I would echo that also. It's glad to have you here. My only comment is going through the list of the landscape plans, I don't see a purple lilac.
That's
Ah,
what was on my, yep.
Mr. Rugg,
Devil's in the details, you know?
Mr. Rugg, I was driving over here this evening, and this is, I think, we've been very fortunate. We've done 4 or 5 of the projects out in that part of Londonderry. And I knew there was a plant that was preferred, and I couldn't remember what it was. And thank you for reminding me.
Purple lilac, the state flower.
The state flower. We will incorporate purple lilac, absolutely.
I'm sure that won't be a deal breaker.
No, I don't even have to ask on that one.
Does the signage that you show in several, 2 locations or 3, does that fall within the regulations for the town?
We believe so, sir, based on our initials.
thought-
Signs are a science unto themselves, but we did a quick code check today, and we believe that is the case. I did forget to mention, I'm sorry, Kelly, if you could scroll up a little bit. We will have 3 what we call wayfinding signs or directional signs. If you scroll, maybe even to the site plan, there's coming in on a site like this, a 17-acre site is fairly sizable. I know up at the shared driveway entrance, there'll be a directional sign here to make sure that anybody coming in off of Innovation Way knows the auto parking is there. This will be a fenced-in area, so they'll know not to come there. And I believe there's a wayfinding sign there. So I think there's a total of 3 wayfinding signs on the site. 4 by 6 signs, but they're fairly basic.
Now, getting back to the main sign, you said externally lit?
Pardon me?
Did you say externally lit on the main sign?
It's gonna be backlit versus external.
Okay, so within?
It'll be blasting backwards, halo lit, so you're not gonna get any illumination directly forward. It's all gonna be projected onto the physical blade that's behind it.
Okay, gotcha.
That's part of the regulations.
Yep, I just want to make sure. Okay.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, it doesn't fall within the purview of what we're dealing with here, but does your roof have the capability of supporting alternative energy
It does.
collection sources?
It does. The building is being planned for future solar if that is developed by ownership. But the building will support it. We're making the structure and the electrical services accommodate that now versus having to deal with it down the line.
Okay, thank you.
And mechanicals for this building around the roof?
Mechanicals will be on the roof. The building is planned to be fully electric for another sustainability initiative for New Balance.
Are you thinking LEED certification on this building?
We're not gonna go down the LEED certification, but there is a predominant sustainability effort that they are taking internally versus the public face of the LEED.
Because we're okaying this, we all want free sneakers, you know?
I didn't hear that.
Neither did
I'll make it louder.
Neither did I.
Oh, yes.
Will there be any,
We don't talk about that.
will there be any retail sales?
In this project, there's no retail planned for at all in this submission.
Okay.
How many people do you think are gonna be employed at this location?
If I may, can you go back to the original drawing, Kelly? Thank you. I forgot to admit, this is the first phase of the project. You'll notice the second phase would be a duplication, so this could
did
grow
see that.
twice. The first phase is intended to have 250 employees, and the second phase up to 450.
450 additional?
No, total.
Total.
Yeah, and then we've earmarked, not only the building addition, but there would be future parking in the back behind the building, and then a small future parking cell here in the front. And, we've sized all our utilities and our stormwater to handle that future expansion.
Okay. Without any further questions or commentary, I think we can recommend
Great.
approval as submitted.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yep, thank you.
Gentlemen, can I get business cards for the
You
minutes? Thanks.
I'll have Jim forward us my contact.
Let's make sure in the minutes we have the names spelled correctly.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
Richard Flyer, Steve Gabber.
And E.Y.? And he's from, yeah,
He's a sole practitioner architect.
okay. Super, thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is staff reports.
None this evening, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moving on to other business. We have Richard Flyer at 2 Litchfield Road.
A little smaller building to discuss tonight for those, but very visible in the town and a very important
Mr. Flyer, if you could just introduce yourself.
cross-section. Yeah, pardon my voice, I've been losing it. There we go. My name is Richard Flyer, and I live at 43 Adams Road. Anyway, I wasn't sure how we should be prepared tonight for this, but your group noticed that, your organization noticed that there was a for sale sign, and if you saw that, then you saw the for lease sign. And we just haven't totally decided what to do. Either way, there is a covenant, I guess that's what it's called, in the deed that makes it impossible, and I'll explain that after I say that, it makes it impossible to sell the building or lease the building to a credible tenant. And there's no way around it. It has easements on the outside, and on the inside it has, I guess, some controls over existing historical items that are in the building. I guess everything from the floor to fireplaces to I don't know what else. There's a few other things that are kind of interesting. But half the building is probably 20 years, all renovated inside. Every historical thing is removed from those rooms. It's the first, I think the first or second part of the building that was built. I think the second was built in 2 stages in the late 1700s, as we understand it, in the early 1800s. So in one section, it has floors that are those bouncing floors that are made of some kind of plasticky material. That's that whole dining room area. I'm not sure what, I've never quite seen them before. I've heard about them. But that's one floor. And then there's a kitchen-like area, but it's not really a kitchen because it doesn't have a stove and a few other things in it. But I think it's 100% non-historical in any way or fashion. The walls are not insulated, and the storm windows are not historical. I don't know when they were put on, but they weren't. They don't meet any historic standard. The roof was put on after that agreement was signed, and I don't know if you saw and went over and looked at that roof, but it doesn't meet any historical standard in the slightest. And that's the whole brown roof on the thing that was built there. Maybe about 7 years ago it was put on. So it's kind of a challenge in terms of if we were to put someone in to live there, we're going to have to do some reasonable work in the kitchen to make it a real kitchen. It's got a tile floor, plastic tile, rubber tile floor, I'm not sure, and some cabinets. But if any of you have been in there for the Democratic meetings or various events, you've seen it. I assume there's at least one Democrat in front of me, but I'm not sure. That leaves us with a problem in terms of getting it leased because many people are interested in living in a building that has normal comfort. Probably, I don't know if it was 4 years ago or 5 years ago, maybe 4, we went through the process of getting and I think we came before this group, and I think we went before the the council. And we wanted to get it changed, use it for housing, and they voted to let us. And we're trying to find the document now, but that went through. But at that time, and I think it was an amendment to the agreement, or I'm not sure how it was done. But at that time, the Democratic Party came in and sort of was an unusual use in terms of the occupation of the building for, I don't know, 5 years, 5.5 years. They recently ran out of funding, and so we're letting them use it at the moment, but there's no rent coming in. So we're heating it, and we're paying the taxes and all the other costs, mortgage. But it's kind of a problem, and if we rent it out to a residential user, the value doesn't cover the expenses by any means of this property. Now, we are all both sides, both groups, care about this building. We've been involved in historic preservation for my whole career, about 50 years. And in what we've done, it's really we're very proud of it. And I know you are all. And this is one of our only sort of historic buildings. I don't know if it's on any register, federal or state, but I know, having renovated these, that in order to deal with the work that needs to be done, this would not qualify for getting probably a lot of funding or any funding on a historical basis, based on its condition now of half the building inside on the ground floor and the upper floor being basically anything that was there was removed by the whoever did it years ago. The bathrooms are all modern bathrooms, or sort of modern, but it has still a lot of charm in it. The one floor, you wouldn't want to be drinking wine or beer or anything because it really slants. You couldn't play marbles in there. But it's the prettiest thing around that area, I think, arguably, and it speaks a lot for sort of hoping we can, bring back some of the town and keep it that way. But I need help. We're both kind of responsible for the building. And what we've had is a number of commercial tenants. We've had two law firms. We've had a school. We've had a management company, all in Londonderry, management company, and a lawyer's group. And they read that agreement, and they said, there's no way I would buy it. And because we can't use it. It has to be, the walls have to be really redone. I suppose you could take the time and build over them so that someday in the future, everything, the plaster and in those rooms would be saved. We've done that before. But these companies that would pay the rent, that would cover the operations of the building and pay to fix some of the other things. It needs a new heating system, for example. The piping, for example, are so old that we've been gradually replacing them when they break. And they've broken several times in different areas, causing huge damage. It would have almost made sense to board up the building and just put it on mothballs. We tried to lighten up the barn with the art group in town, but that's looking old. Our other choice would have been just plywood, and to board up the building because it's non-economical is not something we've ever done in 50 years. I don't even know how to deal with the situation, but we're not proud of the way it looks now. We just almost finished for the second time painting it. What the problem is with that is underneath those clapboards, it's all wet. And there's a ton of rot here and there, and when we've could find it or deal with it, we've done that. It wasn't taken care of before we took it over, and as you see, the roof doesn't comply with historic standards. The barn does, and there are groups in the state that are nonprofit groups that we found one in Portsmouth that has some interest in, from her organization, in putting in some money, a few $100,000, but it will take a lot more to get the barn going. The barn is gone. all of the wood and the siding and everything is absolutely rotted and gone and needs to be replaced. And the roof is maybe the third or fourth time they've been laying a roof on top of a roof. And you can't do that too many times. It's very thick, but it still leaks. And so it needs to all be removed, and the beams inside basically reset and built, and a concrete floor needs to be put into it. But it's an important barn in terms of its history. So we've gotten that far. But in terms of putting in the kind of things that a law firm would need, or a dentist's office would need, the problem is that they need really good air conditioning and really good HVAC system. That's nothing like what exists in the building. So we have that issue. So what we're hoping, I mean, I'd be happy to be involved. We'd be happy to keep it. But we really need a real partner in it. And that means a partnership with you guys, your group. In that, I would think that if everybody's concerned about it, that we could get advice. And some of you know a lot about what you're doing in that area. And maybe together we could apply for some of this nonprofit money. It would help if you were to be involved. And just the barn alone would go a long way with your involvement. I keep waiting for the, was that cupola, or the thing on the top of the building? It's leaning more and more backward. And we've been looking for other ones that might be more proportionate to the building. That wasn't original. So we have that issue. If we were to sell it, I don't know anybody else that has a property in town that they can't sell. But we've had at least 7 or 8 commercial groups that have turned it down because of that agreement. They can't do anything. Absolutely nothing. It's all at the mercy and whim of this organization. And our thinking is that if we could keep the spirit of the agreement, how it was written, in terms of preserving the building, and have an expert really look it over that has certain ability to keep the property safe and going in the right direction, but make it viable, then I think it would be great for anybody owning the building. There are a number of things in terms of the exterior. I remember several years ago when I wanted to put a bank there, and we went quite far with the town, and it was finally shot down. It was a small bank. They were going to pay for the restoration of, if you remember, pay for the restoration of the property, the house. They were going to use the house, but they were going to pay to restore it and the barn. And that's the way most of these kinds of structures that are commercial and historical, many of them are done that way, where there's an allowance in many cities and towns to make a relationship where if the property is kept and restored, that something else can be put near it. But in this case, it was turned down because it went above, it was next to the house in the back where it couldn't be really seen very well from any street, maybe from Litchfield, somewhat, but way in the back. And it was fairly small. I think at the end of the day, we were looking for 3,000 or 4,000 feet, but that bank would have paid for everything. And now we're struck with the building where if it doesn't have significant love from ownership and pride, it's going to continue to deteriorate underneath. It'll be being painted every 2 years or 3 years with the way the water gets to the outside. The area around the building, it's a stone foundation, but the entire area, I don't know when it was done, but when it was landscaped at some time years and years ago, all the fill and area on every side of the building was somehow allowed to lean towards the building instead of draining away. And it's a really big job to have the basement redone all around it. And therefore, they had an original, I don't know how many years ago that was done, but maybe it's historical. There's a drain in the basement floor, and there's a couple of them, and one is in the one corner where eventually they put in a sump pump. But when it rains, it just comes through the stone walls underneath, the rocks. And so, again, if it's the only or one of the only historic buildings in our town, I would think that, you know, it's hard to expect anyone or any owner to restore it unless they you know, had an unlimited budget. And so if that continues and we just somebody keeps painting it, then I don't think the building is going to hold up any better than the barn did in the next 20 years. I think that you'd be dealing with a real mess. It is now, but you'd be dealing with a real mess in terms of getting it back into any shape. So if we were to look at that agreement, maybe there are things that would allow a better process. If somebody were trying to get things done there, they wouldn't be held up for weeks and months by something worked out so that it was an expedited kind of thing. That's how normally buildings are renovated and handled. And in this case, there are just so many things. You'd have a crew there, and then I know what it's like to have a crew leave and come back. You know, a month later, that happened over on Pillsbury Road, where we renovated that farmhouse next to the churches, in the middle of the churches, on Pillsbury Road. And that was very difficult. So if you have ideas, I mean, we have one floor in there that probably should be replaced, and that's the big dining room area, because it bounces when you walk on it, and it doesn't look very good. I don't know when that was done, but I believe it was done a couple of years before we ended up with having the building. So I and my partners are kind of beside ourselves in terms of they just want to sell it. And I never walked away from one of these before, but I have to think about what they're saying. And if we do, then the problem is the only people that can use it can't pay very much rent, because they have the standards they would have if it was a accounting firm or a law firm. They'd have to put up with the bare bones kind of facility inside that that they could, and that would be the only thing they could afford. And what that leaves you are tenants that can't, normally don't have a good chance of lasting. They come and go, just like many of the people that rent these kinds of homes are people that not only can't buy, but they can't really lease the more expensive homes in town. And so we have that issue. So, we've been trying. We've replaced a lot of things. We were forced to. I normally take out pools if they're there anyway because they're not safe. But we could not get an insurance company to insure the building, the property with that pool there. We have that in writing, along with a lot of other things dealing with the building. So, and if anything really happened there that was a difficulty that the insurance company is constantly worried about, the liability issue is there for everyone as well involved. So my thinking is that we have to think about that. And I listened to you before talking about these beautiful buildings that came before this. They're just both beautiful. I love the New Balance building. It's absolutely great. But as much thought needs to go into saving this building for the town, and not expect it to be magic and think that somebody's going to not be able to lift a finger really. And I was criticized and whatever for taking out the pool by a member of the town. And the town, that's where the building department put their foot down and allowed us to do it because it wasn't safe and it wasn't protected and it was a mess. It wasn't in good condition. So if we're going to have those kinds of battles on every little thing, then we need more participation from the people that are responsible for preserving that property. So those are all my thoughts. I can answer any questions you'll have.
Go ahead, John.
I think I've talked, Richard, a little bit about our walkthrough, and for the benefit of the commission, Jim Butler and I did the walkthrough on this property, and I think, and Jim, jump in if you disagree, but the picture that Richard painted of the barn and of the house is what we saw on our walkthrough. Okay, the barn is I'm not a structural engineer. I don't know if the barn is a recoverable item or not, but it certainly is dilapidated and despite, I think, some attempts to close out the colony of bats, I think, with the artistic boarding up of the window and
It worked.
all that kind of stuff. The barn is difficult at best. The house had everything that he described and more. I wouldn't even describe that as a kitchen. It was more like a commercial break room because it had kind of a big area, but no appliances of note. And the floors certainly felt like walking uphill at points in the building. So it's been well maintained. It's been painted. There's been some exterior work done, exterior painting. There's been some cleanup in that entry area that was done. So, one of the questions I think we were looking to answer on the inspection was, did Mr. Flyer and maybe the previous owners meet the standard of substantially maintaining the buildings in their current or better condition? And I would answer that question, yes. I don't, with an understanding that when Mr. Flyer, the owner before him, and the owner before him, because the easement goes back 3 owners, okay? When these folks were in that building, I think everyone has made an attempt within the possibilities of doing things financially maintaining the building, but the building was in bad shape to start with. So basically, you're ending up, what's the expression, putting is it a silk tie on a pig or something? I mean, that's basically what we end up doing with this building, trying to maintain it as it is. So, so it's dilapidated. There's been some, it was clear, we also met with Mr. Flyer's real estate agent, and it was clear that she hasn't had any interest, and whether there's something in the easement that can be discussed will be a matter we'll kick over to the town manager, I think, but.
Well, she's had a lot of interest, but as soon as they see that one document, they have all walked away. We've kept it.
And that's fine, and I think the commission has to think a little bit about what's our interest here, okay? Is our interest ultimately in preservation of the house and perhaps of the barn? And if that's our interest, is our best route forward to ask perhaps the town manager to talk about the easement and what can be worked out with regards to modifications to the easement to make the property saleable, or what can be worked out with the easement to put Mr. Flyer in a better opportunity to restore the property, maybe through commercial development. So I think that's where we ended up. Jim, I don't.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. I had the opportunity to walk around the barn, went inside the barn. I wouldn't suggest anyone go inside the barn because it's a little bit hazardous. The sills are pretty much rotted. Any of the stone foundation is starting to kick out. The roof is a real question. The bones itself, the timbers and the structures may be okay. They look okay. I'm not an engineer. But I think Richard pretty much painted a pretty accurate picture of the barn. And I think we're in agreement with that. Now, with regards to the house, once again, we walked around the house, went inside, outside the house. I had the opportunity to visit that office or house, or whatever you want to call it at the time, with the previous owner. There are wide wood floored planks throughout the house. Yes. Is there some historical value to it? Yes, there is. Are there some panels on the walls that have some historical factor? I would say probably. But there is a problem. There's a major problem here. And I can understand that it's going to be very difficult to sell this house because it's a quagmire. If you go to sell that house or someone tries to rehab that house, they have to think of ADA. Those bathrooms certainly don't meet ADA requirements. The stairs that go from the first floor to the second floor, I'm sure they don't meet code. I mean, I've been in the business long enough that I can make a quick assessment, and you know, I'm not always right, but I think I'm pretty damn close to on this one. For someone to go and buy that under these pretenses, to try to remodel it, the wiring is all going to have to be changed. They're going to have to either go through the walls. I mean, there's just isn't adequate wiring for a law firm, for an office, or a dentist. There's just going to be tremendous amount of money to put in just to try to bring it up to snuff. I don't know what the historical value is. I don't know if this is on the historical register or not. It's been in town for quite a long time, and I understand that. But it's my opinion. The one thing that I did like about it, and unfortunately they have been enclosed, I don't think they have been damaged, but enclosed so people couldn't get into it, is there are a couple of nice fireplaces in there that show the date of the house. You know, there are floors, you're right, there's vinyl floors there, the old wooden floors there, there's ceramic tile floors there. it really is a problem. And what I would suggest that we do, and it's only a suggestion, is that we ask the town council to instruct the town manager to see whether or not the easements on the houses, I'm not gonna say lifted because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not involved in that, but if we can somehow either massage it or change it so it becomes a little bit more appeasing to someone to buy it. But right now, I'll be honest with you, if I had all the money in the world, I wouldn't touch it. Because you really, you know what it is? It's like dropping the money in a hole. It's unfortunate. For instance, the windows. The windows, I don't know when the windows were changed, but I would say they probably have been changed within the last 15 years. They were either vinyl or aluminum windows, so they don't mean any historical perspective. I think Richard did a good job taking out the fencing and taking out the pool and opening that up, because it did open up that house on the lot. But I really think we're caught between, all of us are caught between a rock and a hard place. And somehow we have to determine, or at least see whether or not we can change some of these easement to make it more pliable, to either get someone in there that has the money, that wants to rehab it, which will cost a ton of money. I mean, the plumbing, I don't even know, there could be, are there any cast iron pipes in there? There could be
think so.
asbestos in there for, I don't know. But I mean, that's how old the building is. You know, the cellar leaks like a sieve.
You even have lead plumbing, you know, it's,
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know how much more you can do to that building. I don't know how much I would want to continue to invest in that building to keep it up. Because it's a money pit. It really is a money pit.
We've put in about $80,000
Have you?
of
Yeah.
repairs in the property since we've owned it. So the small rent that we've gotten has been pretty much used up for just trying to keep the building going.
I think our best bet at the time, and it was hotly discussed, was the bank, because the banks have, well, at the time, they had deep pockets, and they could get certain tax credits, and it was, if I remember correctly, it was a small savings bank, I think it was.
Yeah, Merrimack.
And, you know,
a credit
that's
union or
something
something like
maybe a
that.
bank at the time could have been drawn in, and they did some renderings, if I remember correctly, but that got shut down.
Yeah, I have it. I have the renderings if anybody wants to see it.
I just feel as though that house and that barn's gonna stay the way it is till either it falls down or it burns to the ground, one or the other. I mean, I just don't.
You know, if you look at the liability, I'm barely squeaking by with the insurance company. And I have the documents here that show when they were not threatened, they took our insurance away, and we had to approve that the pool was out and a few other little things before they would reinstate the insurance. So that was scary, because I don't know what kind of liability we would have or everybody would have if you're dealing with something that's controlled to the degree that you can't move financially with something. Then what do? And yet, you know, we've tried to deal with some of the hazards, but I worry about the barn because, you know, when you drive by it, you can see that the barn doors are, a lot of parts are missing, and other matters with it, and it's missing the whole bottom, so you could just almost crawl right in. So,
Yeah, because this actually goes back to 2006, when the town council at the, really what was recommended in the master plan at the time, one of the four major recommendations they made, the town council put together a historic properties preservation task force. And that was looking at all the properties. There's some basic criteria that the task force had laid down of, for what to be considered historic in the town's terms, was something greater than 100 years, something that had at least external authenticity that was at 75%. I think it had to be also, if it was historically significant, whether from a historic event or from the particular type of architecture, and developed a list. I think what we have is 137 properties. Well, actually, there's 139. Two of the owners declined to be a part of it. But the task force did quite a bit of work in working with people who had historic houses and even properties. And those individuals certainly had a love of something historic, and they put a lot of their lives into it, more than, what a normal person would do to maintain a house. And I think this occurred probably not too long after that. But of that list, the town had these properties it would like to at least maintain, but it didn't have the wherewithal to actually go purchase them and maintain them and do anything. So what the task force realized was the best way to use a historic property was, have it being used, either as a residence, and most of the resident, the historic properties were residents at the time, or being a office, very, very light commercial activity. And I know the DeCarlos were interested in selling the property, but had great difficulty, because I think a lot of the location, they had a couple of young kids, and they were very concerned about the kids because of all the traffic that is around there. So they had come to the planning board, and the planning board, I think, had looked at the time into, light use, and I think we had put together a potential ordinance which didn't, fly because of people at the public hearing didn't think we should be creating businesses out of, old property, and especially some of them were along Mammoth Road. One property was developed, that's just north of the CVS, and I can't think of the name of it now, but.
Oh, yeah, my lawyers,
Roby?
I was just gonna say, Roby.
Roby House?
Yes, the Roby House. And the Roby House was, we didn't know at first what was gonna happen to it, but a gentleman from Derry who had, a computer business, software business, bought the property and has made modifications to it, which allowed, his business to utilize it.
They did a good job, and then he
Yes.
went bankrupt.
And that was something the town really wanted. The other was what's the Coach Stop now. It was back the old days of the Homestead Restaurant. There was a series of restaurants before that. But the Historical Society, this is back in the 80s, had gone out to actually picket the place. So the developer wouldn't, in fact, I think it was he'd filed a demolition permit. But then the economy took a turn south, and it just was unused for a while until, I think it was the McDonough's was interested in it, using it as a restaurant, which it had been for many years. But really, in regards to this property, we couldn't put it into a historic property, but the town council at the time did do it. It was basically spot zoning against the planning board's protests. The planning board kind of worked with the DeCarlos and then the potential owner, and that's what this agreement here was between the town council at that time and the town manager at that time. Because the purchaser of the property, which was the Londonderry Times, really loved the house and wanted to maintain it as a historic property. So the town had reached an agreement with the DeCarlos, and that's what we have tonight. So that was done at that period of time. But the basic tenets of what the Historic Properties Preservation Task Force were looking for is at least a good preservation of the external appearance. It didn't always have to be the same materials, and a lot of those materials, are not available today, or some probably at considerable cost. But I think we have to look at the cost of it, because certainly I think we all love that building. It's part of the town. It's in a very visible location, and to utilize it as a, what the planning board visualized was, and the Preservation Property Task Force visualized was as a light office use, whether the lawyer's office, doctor's office, dentist's office, insurance agent, or, I mean, even the possibility of a bank, but a lot of banks now like drive-through windows, we went through that. With the property, it just was not really very viable, and from a planning perspective, it probably would have been a horrendous situation there.
Actually, we worked out a good plan for that with the building department and the other department with John, who runs it now.
Engineering.
Oh, yeah, John Trout.
He came out there and we worked out a great plan for exiting onto the very back end in only one direction on whatever that.
Litchfield Road?
Yeah.
Onto Litchfield.
So, but, you know, there comes a point with a building where, and it's probably the old stuff that's still remaining, but a lot of the other things that happen in between, like the plumbing over the years and some of the electrical, everything starts going. And in this case, everything is going. The building was not given to us. We didn't take it over in good condition. It was trashed. And it cost thousands and thousands of dollars to deal with what we were left with. I don't know if you're aware of that. But it was not in good condition, and it hadn't been taken care of. It was very minimal.
I hadn't seen it personally, but I've heard from individuals.
We have pictures of it. You wouldn't believe it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just offer kind of our involvement and where we see this process going from here. Sure. We've had discussions with Mr. Flyer. I've had discussions with Mr. Flyer probably 4 or 5 times going back several months. The assistant town manager and I have spoken with him and met with him. And I just want to, if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, sort of orient the board to what we see as the issues and the potential path forward. So Mr. Flyer is here because we encourage that this should be the first stop. Because I agree with Councilor Butler that to the extent there is going to be any kind of modification to this historic preservation easement, that is a town council decision. However, it would be my expectation that the town council would want to know, what does the Heritage Commission think about this? And so I think it's important that this meeting is taking place tonight. In terms of the easement itself, it has many of the features that have been alluded to tonight, but I think it's important to go over some of them. It has that obligation that you referred to, Mr. Mann, regarding maintaining the condition of the property, at least in its current state, and that obligation is on the owner, and that obligation persists out into perpetuity. It has restrictions on pretty much anything that is going to be done to the property, inside or outside, to include the placement of structures, the growing of trees, shrubs, et cetera, on the exterior, needs to come back either to the town, to the Heritage Commission, to the Planning Board, or perhaps to both. I do want to pause to note what I think we all recognize, which is that as you noted, Mr. Rugg, a lot of times you see these historic preservation efforts focused on the exterior of the building, but in this instance there is a requirement that changes to the interior. Most changes to the interior require sign-off from this body, the planning board, or both. You have to remember as well that this, at the time of the rezoning, was placed into the historic district in town, which creates additional requirements for sign-off. So you have the requirements in the historic preservation easement that this board sign off on certain things. You have a separate requirement under the zoning ordinance and under the historic district provisions of that ordinance requiring sign-off. And I think that is perhaps a factor in what is scaring off potential users. You have some provisions in here that talk about, or that anticipate the possibility of what's happening now. And that is that conditions may change. And what paragraph 10 of this instrument states is, grantor and grantee acknowledge the possibility that circumstances may arise in the future to render the purpose of this easement impossible to accomplish. In addition, both parties recognize that the possibility of condemnation and casualty always exists. In the event such circumstances do in fact arise, the parties agree that those provisions of this easement, which are rendered impossible by performance by such circumstances, condemnation, or casualty, may be extinguished by judicial proceedings in a court of competent jurisdiction. And so I believe that to the extent there is going to be a modification, first of all, I think it can be modified. I think it may require approval of a court to do that. But as I said, I think that what's important is what I think we all recognize, which is that you can't have historic preservation in this case without commercial viability. And I do think that based on some of the fairly one-sided language that exists in this historic preservation easement, we don't have commercial viability right now. And so I echo everybody's comments. I think that this is something that should be explored because on the path that we're headed, I don't think we're achieving that purpose, that mutual purpose that we set out on in 2006.
Mr. Butler, you had made a recommendation
Yes.
that we direct the town manager to review the easement and do as you've suggested, bring it up to the town council and/or our attorney and talk about what would be necessary to change the easement to make it commercially viable. I think that's a good idea. I don't think we have many other options in this case.
Well, I also want to bring up the fact that at one point, the Max Homestead, we looked at the Max Homestead, and we spent money, correct me if I'm wrong, Art, to have someone go in and evaluate that house.
Yes.
And that house is in a lot better condition than this, and we stayed away from it, because we all know it was gonna cost a lot of money, taxpayers' money. And I didn't want to throw bad money, good money after bad. And so that house definitely was in better condition, and we didn't get a good report on it.
Max was, I thought, fairly decent, not perfect, but,
And it was a livable house.
yes, yeah.
I mean, the Mack family lived in it.
You could all say that, well, perhaps I didn't do my due diligence, but I didn't, buying the house was a byproduct of getting involved there. So I ended up with a house without wanting it. And that's all I can say about that. But I just wanted you to know we went into it with our eyes open, but for a different reason. So,
Yeah, from, my recollection is that it seemed like the agreement worked first. This is what the parties wanted. But longer term, it has not been, worked to the desire that we would like, because we'd love to see that building, stay there. We'd like to see it maintained, we'd like to see it restored. We don't have the wherewithal to do it, but having it used by either individual or a company, small company, would be perfect. And that, I think, one of the major things the Historic Preservation Task Force realized was the best thing is to keep these properties in use, whether it's a house or whether it's an office, and to work with these people from what we, what we could. We just didn't have the money to do it. And I know as far as preservation, it just comes to the external appearance. We had no jurisdiction on the interior at all. And most of those old houses probably had 1960 style kitchens. because it'd been renovated. And a lot of, I know with the Marsden House, when that was torn apart, they found out, I think there was 3 additions put onto it since it was built in, it had to be early 1700s, or 1720, 1722, about in that vintage, or 1724. That's a number that sticks in my brain for it.
I think that Mr. Fly's intent is honorable. I don't know how many people realize that when Mr. Fly came to live in Londonderry, he bought that small little house across the street from the town common. And at the time, the front porch was falling off. We had blue top hanging over the roof, and it was a disgrace. It was an eyesore. It was a disgrace, and that's hollow ground, in my opinion. I mean, it was right next to the town common. And to Richard's credit, he spent some money because the bones were good. I think you got the high school kids involved in it. And if you look at it today, it looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, remember one old home day, we had, there were paintings in the windows. The windows were taken out, so we
Right.
had it boarded up. and
That
the
was my
paintings
first
done by
window
people in
tour.
town.
I
It was
truly,
fun.
I personally believe that if Mr. Fly had thought that there was a way in which he could restore it, I believe he would. It's my opinion.
Have you all seen it inside at one time or another?
I haven't seen the inside.
No, I haven't either. I've heard from several individuals what it looks like, and it's not, probably the best way to put it, needs a lot of work.
Yeah, but it's not, from a point of view, there's a Ukrainian family, for example, that calls us their representative's been calling us, two engineers, a grandmother and a mother, and then a couple of children. And our government's bringing them over here, and that's where they wanted to come to Londonderry. And they like that house. Looked fine for them. But in terms of putting them in there and with things breaking continually, I just feel for them though. They want to be in Londonderry in the school system. That's what they've been very adamant. But what's happening is underneath underneath the clapboards, it's all wet and rotting.
Yeah, that's probably the major concern is it's just really rotting away. It's just sitting there rotting away. If we do nothing, it'll probably collapse. We won't have it anymore. But how to maintain it? I grew up in an old house that was probably built early 1800s. It had been in the family like 5 generations. My father was kind of a history nut, and my brother and my father and myself, we replumbed and rewired the whole place. There's believe me, a lot of work, a lot of cobwebs, a lot of scrapes from, crawling into spaces to push the wiring. The wiring was all internal in the partition, pulling the old plaster apart and everything to get to some of it and to put insulation in. And it was frustrated my mother, but my father loved doing it. And for the 30 years that odd years that I had lived there, and they had the place, it was in one state of disrepair or another.
Yeah.
It's a love to restore an old house.
I look at our historic area, Morrison House, et cetera, and the house they had taken down, and the beams are all in those containers. They came to me about 3 months ago and asked if I would take it and rebuild it in Londonderry. But it's $1 million. They had their estimates from before of how to put that back together again, and I don't think you could use it. It's a very old house that has the characteristics of low ceilings and other things.
Well, I think this conversation has been productive. I think I think the chairman has a course that I would agree with. And let's not beat a dead horse. Let's get it over to the council and see if we can,
You want a motion on it?
Agreed. Yeah, I was thinking we could have a motion. So, once again, I'll just restate my recommendation, which is to direct the town manager to work with town council and the town attorney to make necessary changes to the easement to make property commercially viable. Is there any other language anybody thinks should be involved?
No, the only thing I will flag, Mr. Chairman, is I do think that, and Councilor Butler, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there should be, there will need to be additional guidance in terms of, should a distinction be drawn between the exterior and the interior? What to do with the barn? And I don't think tonight is necessarily the right time to have that discussion, but I imagine the council will have some thoughts on that and may refer such questions back to this body, so that that information can get worked into what we're looking at doing.
Sure.
It's reasonable.
Yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of back and forth, to get everything resolved and,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the one concern I have is listening to Mr. Flyer a little bit. He's got no rent coming in currently from this property. I think the barn is, that is an immediate danger, okay, when I look at that barn. I didn't walk in as far as Mr. Butler did, because I put a value on my life, okay? I think whatever we do, it has to be sort of a post-haste kind of thing. Because commercially viable can't be commercially viable a year from now. It's gotta be in a reasonable period of time.
I agree with those comments. I do think that the situation's gotten away from us a little bit with respect to the condition, at least of the barn, but perhaps the rest of the property as well. The one thing I would say is this: I'm used to it because I'm a lawyer by training, but to the extent a court proceeding is required, those things never go quickly. And I just want to be clear, I've referred a couple of times to a court proceeding. This instrument has a mechanism to sort of reopen the agreement. I'm not 100% certain that it's going to require a visit to court. But the situation that we're discussing tonight is a cooperative effort, right? Certainly Mr. Flyer could go in and ask unilaterally for a court to revisit the terms of this agreement. That's not what we're talking about here tonight. We're talking about the town council, if it's comfortable proceeding to reopen this agreement to make it more commercially viable, doing so cooperatively with the current owner, and then, if needed, going to a court asking for approval to do that.
Richard, is that okay with you?
Yes.
I want it, okay.
Yeah, and also if you have ideas, other things, you could have a clubhouse for this organization.
I don't know if I put too many people on the floor. Got enough problem with the Lions Hall.
so Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll
So
second it.
motioned, so seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Immediately following this meeting, I will send an email to Mr. Malaguti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Flyer. Okay.
Can you come up to the mic?
David. Mr. Ellis, could you come up to the mic, please?
Yeah, sure, sorry.
That's okay.
So the folks at home can hear you.
Dave Ellis, most of you know me, I'm a resident in town. When this agreement you're going to work out and figure out what you'd like to do, when will there be an opportunity for public input into that?
So, I hadn't moved on to public input tonight yet, but that was next on the agenda, where you would have had the ability
We
to
haven't
speak.
got an agreement to give input on yet.
Also, as you stated, I think this is gonna come back from the town council. Because this is going on to town council, I think that may probably be
That
the
would be
correct
the
venue. But if they send more things back to us to give them input, you will also have another chance to speak.
It's just, I would like to have a chance to look it over and make public comment. I'm sure others would.
By all means, and Mr. Chairman, I certainly want to acknowledge Mr. Ellis's comments. Something, that's so significant to the town as this property and the easement that's currently protecting it,
Most likely have a
should-
public hearing.
we should have at a minimum, a public hearing, the opportunity for the public to look at the document that's under discussion. There is no document, we're not even close to that. But I fully agree that this is not something that should be rushed from vis-à-vis the public participation component of this.
Thank you. Richard, that's some historical research I did on the property.
All right, everybody.
I
So next item was public input. I think we've accomplished that.
Okay.
Followed by adjournment. Could I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I just got one thing.
Mr. Rugg.
David Ellis had written us a letter back April 21st in regards to the historic resources, and maybe the board could, kind of review that at some point. But my own opinion, I think it would, we'd have to, we're supposed to update the historic properties list, and probably be an opportunity for the town, or the historic, for a Historic District Heritage Commission to review it at that time. Because there's a disagreement between what the state considers historic and what the town considers historic. And a lot of what the town considered historic at the time was probably more practical because it was entirely volunteer. We did not have a big staff to go view all these properties. So that was why 100 years was the cutoff. Now, if we redid it, it's still 100 years. It included a lot more houses that some of us consider much more modern. What we're interested with the Historic Properties Task Force are the old, really old historic houses and those that had character through architecture or some historic significance.
What was the date of that email?
That was April 21st, 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mike, real quick question. Do we have any openings on the Historic Heritage Commission?
I don't believe so,
Okay.
but I can double check on that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Was that Jim?
If we had any openings.
One alternate position is still open.
Is-
Jury the date.
There is.
Is Mr.
Someone in
Jeffers,
mind?
I do.
is Mr. Jeffers still on the board?
Oh, no.
I think he resigned.
I believe so.
do.
He is still listed.
He hasn't attended
But-
a number of meetings.
I think he actually only attended one or two, so.
Perhaps the commission should consider what you may want to do about that.
I know Laura
Good
has
idea,
been
Kelly.
here when she can, so if she's not here tonight, so. I don't know how she has filled in for absent members and so forth where needed.
We will get a fully up-to-date accounting of who's on and who isn't.
Well, if there is an opening, I would like to see if I could talk to Mr. Ellis about maybe filling that position.
I have talked with David also, so I know David's considering it, so.
Wonderful. He's a wealth of information.
Yes.
You didn't hear that.
Okay. Back to the business at hand.
Yes, yes, sir. So
We
moved.
have a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Anybody second that motion? Seconded by Sue Joudry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it, meeting is adjourned.